You're just another black boy with no future. Judge Harmon's gavel crashes down. Devon Taylor rises. The courtroom falls silent. 17. Shoulders squared despite the weight of every stare. The judge leans forward. I know you're kind. Just another statistic. His finger jabs the air between them. No discipline, no father figure. The judge's lips curl. Where is your father anyway? Devon maintains perfect eye contact. May I call him, Your Honor? Judge Harmon smirks. By all means, if he even answers. Devon pulls out his phone, dials. The courtroom watches. Dad, Judge Harmon says you failed to raise me right. He's wondering where you are. Devon's voice remains steady. Could you come to courtroom 4B now? The line clicks dead. No ringtone, no response. A low murmur ripples through the courtroom like a slow wave rolling toward shore. Someone snickers. Someone else exhales loudly, relieved they aren't the one standing there. Judge Harmon leans back in his chair, satisfied. Well, he says, tapping the bench with a pen, I suppose that answers that. Devon doesn't sit. He doesn't argue. He doesn't look away. He stands perfectly still, hands folded behind his back, like he's waiting for something the rest of the room can't see yet. The judge glances down at the file again, flipping pages with exaggerated boredom. 17 years old, prior incident at school, truancy warning, disorderly conduct. Devon opens his mouth. Do not interrupt me, Harmon snaps. The judge clears his throat, voice growing louder, more performative. People like you always think the rules don't apply, that someone will save you. He leans forward again. But today, reality is calling. Devon's mother sits in the back row, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles have turned white. She wants to stand, wants to scream. But she knows better. Any outburst will only confirm the story already being written for her son. Judge Harmon straightens his robe. This court takes repeat behavioral issues seriously, he says, and I won't have my courtroom turned into a stage for excuses. Devon finally speaks. Yes, Your Honor. The calm in his voice surprises a few people. Harmon narrows his eyes. You have something to say now. Yes, sir. I'd like the record to reflect that my father is currently unavailable. The judge scoffs. Of course he is. Devon nods once. But he will call back. That earns a laugh. Not loud, not cruel, just dismissive. Judge Harmon lifts the gavel slightly. Son, he says, almost gently now, hope is a dangerous thing when it's misplaced. The gavel comes down. Given your history, this court is prepared to sentence you today. A sharp inhale cuts through the room. Devon's heart pounds, but his face doesn't show it. Judge Harmon looks directly at him. Unless, he adds slowly, you have something truly extraordinary to offer this court. Silence. Devon meets his gaze. I do, he says. The judge raises an eyebrow. And what would that be? Devon doesn't answer. Instead, his phone vibrates. Once, then again. He looks down at the screen, and for the first time his expression changes. Who just called Devon? And why does the judge suddenly feel the room shifting? Devon's phone vibrates again. The sound is soft, barely audible. But in the dead silence of the courtroom, it might as well be thunder. Judge Harmon notices. His eyes flick down, irritation flashing across his face. You will silence that device immediately, he snaps. Devon doesn't move right away. He looks at the screen once more. Then, calmly, he raises his eyes to the bench. Your Honor, may I answer? A ripple of disbelief moves through the room. Judge Harmon lets out a short laugh. You're asking permission now? He shakes his head. After wasting enough of this court's time? Devon swallows, but his voice stays steady. Yes, sir. The judge studies him, really studies him, as if trying to decide whether this is defiance or desperation. Finally, with a dismissive wave of his hand, Harmon says, Make it quick, this changes nothing. Devon taps the screen. Yes, Dad. The word Dad hangs in the air. A few heads turn. Someone in the gallery leans forward. Devon listens. His shoulders relax just slightly, not relief, but certainty. Yes, sir, courtroom 4B, he says. Yes. Right now. He lowers the phone. Judge Harmon smirks. So, he says, he finally called back. Yes, Your Honor. And? Harmon leans back. What excuse does he have for abandoning his responsibilities today? Devon doesn't answer immediately. He takes a breath. He's on his way. The judge chuckles. From where? Another state? Another disappointment? Before Devon can respond, the courtroom doors open. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough. A bailiff steps inside and walks quickly toward the clerk, whispering something that makes her eyes widen. She glances up at the bench, then back at the bailiff. Judge Harmon notices the exchange. What is it? He demands. The bailiff clears his throat. Your Honor, there's a security detail entering the building, Harmon frowns. For what reason? They didn't say, the bailiff replies, but they asked for you by name. A hush settles over the room. Judge Harmon straightens in his chair. This is a local courthouse, he says sharply. We don't get security details without notice. The clerk's hands tremble slightly as she checks her screen again. Sir, she says quietly, they're requesting access, and they're already clearing the hallway. Devon stands silently, eyes forward. Judge Harmon turns toward him slowly. What did you do? The judge asks. Devon shakes his head. Nothing, Your Honor. The judge scoffs. Don't play games with me, boy. The courtroom doors open again, this time wider. Two men in dark suits step inside, alert, professional, scanning the room without saying a word. A third follows behind them, holding credentials against his chest. Judge Harmon rises halfway from his seat. This court is in session, he snaps. Who authorized this interruption? One of the men speaks, his voice calm but firm. Sir, we're here at the request of the United States Department of Justice. The words land heavy. Judge Harmon freezes. The man continues, eyes locking onto Devon. We're escorting a federal official to this courtroom. Devon finally turns his head. The hallway beyond the doors fills with movement. Footsteps, measured, unhurried. Judge Harmon's mouth opens, then closes. For the first time, the judge doesn't know what to say. Who is walking toward courtroom 4B? And why does the judge suddenly look afraid? The footsteps grow closer. Not rushed, not hesitant, confident. Judge Harmon grips the edge of the bench as if grounding himself. His eyes flick toward the doors again, then back to Devon, as though trying to recalculate a story he thought he already understood. This is highly irregular, Harmon mutters. I wasn't notified of any. The courtroom doors open fully. Every head turns. A tall man steps inside, posture straight, presence unmistakable. His suit is simple, dark, perfectly tailored. No flash, no excess, just authority that doesn't need decoration. Two agents remain slightly behind him. The man pauses, scanning the room once, the bench, the gallery, the bailiff, before his eyes land on Devon. Their gazes meet. The man nods. Devon nods back. Judge Harmon clears his throat loudly. And you are? He demands, trying to reclaim control. The man reaches into his jacket, producing identification. He hands it to the bailiff without ceremony. Robert Taylor, he says, United States Attorney General. The room doesn't react at first, like a wave that hasn't reached shore yet. Then it hits. A gasp from the gallery, a whispered, "Oh my God." The clerk's pen slips from her fingers and clatters onto the desk. Judge Harmon's face drains of color. The Attorney General? He stammers. Robert Taylor turns his attention to the bench now, his expression calm, unreadable. Yes, Your Honor. Harmon swallows hard. I wasn't informed of your visit. You weren't meant to be, Robert replies evenly. Silence presses down. Robert steps forward, stopping beside Devon. He places a hand on his son's shoulder, not possessive, not dramatic, just grounding. Are you okay? He asks quietly. Yes, sir, Devon answers. The judge shifts uncomfortably. Mr. Attorney General, with all due respect, this is a sentencing hearing. I know exactly what this is, Robert interrupts, still calm. And I heard enough from the hallway. Judge Harmon stiffens. You were eavesdropping on court proceedings? No, Robert says. I was listening to a public servant speak in a public courtroom. He turns slightly, addressing the room. I heard assumptions. I heard character judgments. I heard a child reduced to a stereotype. Robert looks back at the judge. And I heard you question my role as a father. The judge's lips part, but no sound comes out. Devon's mother covers her mouth, tears welling. Judge Harmon tries again. I meant no disrespect. My comments were rhetorical. Robert's gaze sharpens, not angry but precise. Words spoken from a bench are never rhetorical, he says. They carry weight, consequences. The judge straightens, forcing composure. This young man stands before me because of his actions. Robert nods. Then let's talk about actions. He gestures subtly, and one of the agents steps forward, holding a slim folder. Before you proceed, Robert continues, there are matters concerning your courtroom conduct that need to be addressed. Judge Harmon's confidence cracks. Just a little. What matters? He asks. Robert meets his eyes. Patterns. What patterns does the Attorney General see, and how many times has this judge crossed the line before today? Judge Harmon lets out a tight laugh, the kind meant to brush something aside. Patterns, he says. Mr. Attorney General, with respect, you don't walk into my courtroom and accuse me of— I'm not accusing, Robert Taylor replies calmly. I'm documenting. The word lands harder than any accusation. One of the agents steps forward and places the slim folder on the clerk's desk. The clerk hesitates, then slides it toward the judge. Judge Harmon doesn't touch it. I don't need to see whatever that is, he says sharply. My record speaks for itself. Robert nods. It does. The agent opens the folder anyway, turning it so the judge can see. Pages filled with charts, sentencing comparisons, dates, neighborhood data. Robert speaks evenly, almost clinically. In the last 5 years, defendants under the age of 20 from 3 specific districts have received sentences averaging 42% longer than defendants charged with identical offenses elsewhere. Judge Harmon's jaw tightens. Robert continues. Those districts also happen to share 2 characteristics: lower median income and higher minority populations. A murmur ripples through the courtroom. Judge Harmon finally snaps, slamming his hand on the bench. This is outrageous. You're cherry-picking statistics to undermine judicial discretion. Robert meets his gaze, then explain why discretion only seems to run one direction. The judge's eyes flick to Devon, just for a moment, then away. This young man, Harmon says, raising his voice, is here because he violated the law. Robert turns to Devon. Did you? Devon answers honestly. Yes, sir, I made a mistake. Robert nods. And you took responsibility? Yes. Robert turns back to the bench. Then why did you feel the need to go beyond the facts of the case? Judge Harmon bristles. I was establishing context. No, Robert corrects gently. You were establishing character, based on assumptions. The courtroom is completely silent now. Robert takes a step closer to the bench, lowering his voice. Do you know what concerns me most, Your Honor? Judge Harmon doesn't answer. That this isn't the first time, Robert says. And it wouldn't have been the last if my son hadn't been standing here today. Devon's mother lets out a quiet sob. Judge Harmon straightens his robe, trying to recover authority. This is inappropriate. If you have a complaint, file it through proper channels. Robert nods again. We already have. He gestures to the agents. The Judicial Review Board has opened a preliminary inquiry into conduct in this courtroom. The judge's face goes pale. You can't do that based on one hearing, he snaps. We didn't, Robert replies. This hearing was simply confirmation. Judge Harmon looks around the room, at the bailiff, the clerk, the gallery. For the first time, he realizes he's no longer in control of the room. And today, Robert adds, we're going to make sure justice is actually served. The judge swallows hard. Devon stands quietly at his father's side, the same calm posture as before. Only now, everyone understands why. What happens when the judge realizes the sentence he was about to give may now apply to himself? Judge Harmon exhales slowly, forcing a thin smile that convinces no one. "This is highly irregular," he says again, weaker this time. "You're undermining the authority of this court." Robert Taylor doesn't raise his voice. "Authority isn't undermined when it's questioned," he says. "It's undermined when it's abused." The judge's fingers curl around the edge of the bench. "You think one surprise visit gives you the right to lecture me?" Harmon snaps. "I've served this court for decades." Robert nods. "And in that time, you've shaped thousands of lives." He pauses. "That's why this matters." The agent beside him steps forward again, reading from a prepared document. "Effective immediately, all sentencing in this courtroom is stayed pending review." The clerk's head snaps up. "Sir?" Judge Harmon stands fully now. "You don't have that authority." Robert meets his glare calmly. "The Department of Justice does, and so does the Judicial Council." The judge's voice rises. "This is political theater." "No," Robert replies. "It's accountability." He turns slightly, addressing the courtroom. "This young man was minutes away from a life-altering sentence, not because the law demanded it, but because prejudice whispered it was acceptable." A hush settles in again. Robert looks back at the bench. "You spoke of life, Your Honor." The judge stiffens. "Yes," Harmon says defensively, "because consequences matter." "They do," Robert agrees, "for everyone." Devon finally speaks again. "Your Honor," he says respectfully, "may I say something?" Judge Harmon hesitates, then nods stiffly. Devon takes a breath. "I made a mistake," he says. "I'm not denying that. But you didn't talk about my mistake." He lifts his eyes to the bench. "You talked about who you thought I was." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Devon continues, calm but firm. "You didn't ask about my grades, or my record, or the people who raised me." He glances briefly at his parents. "You decided my future before I opened my mouth." The judge's face tightens. Robert places a hand lightly on Devon's back, then steps forward again. "Given the circumstances," Robert says, "I am requesting this case be reassigned." Judge Harmon's mouth opens in protest, but no words come. The bailiff shifts uncomfortably. The clerk nods slowly. I'll notify administration," she says. The gavel sits untouched on the bench. Judge Harmon looks at it, then at Devon. For the first time, shame flickers across his face. "This hearing is adjourned," he mutters. The gavel falls, softer than before. Devon doesn't smile. He doesn't celebrate. He simply exhales. Outside the courtroom, whispers erupt. Phones come out. News spreads fast. Robert leans down to Devon. "You handled yourself well," he says quietly. Devon nods. "I was scared." Robert gives a small smile. "Courage isn't the absence of fear." They turn to leave. Behind them, Judge Harmon sinks slowly back into his chair, staring at the empty bench where power once felt permanent. But was this the end, or just the beginning of what the investigation would uncover? The hallway outside courtroom 4B buzzes with low voices. Court staff whisper. Attorneys pause mid-step. A few people openly stare as Devon walks beside his father, trying to connect the calm teenager they just saw with the weight of what just happened. Devon's mother grips his hand tightly now, no longer trying to hide her tears. "I didn't know," she whispers. "I didn't know he'd say those things." Devon shakes his head gently. "It wasn't about me, Mom." Robert glances at his son, thoughtful. Outside, a cluster of reporters waits near the courthouse entrance. Camera lenses shift toward them the moment they appear. An agent steps forward. "No questions at this time," he says firmly. They move past the doors into daylight. Only then does Devon's breath finally shake. He looks down at his hands. "They were going to give me life," he says quietly. "Not just a sentence, a label." Robert nods. "That's why words from a bench matter." They pause near the steps. Across the street, people are still coming and going, unaware that something fundamental just shifted inside that building. Devon looks back at the courthouse. "Is he really under investigation?" he asks. Robert doesn't answer right away. Yes, he says finally, but it won't be fast. Devon frowns. So he just keeps going? For now, Robert admits. Systems don't like being challenged. Devon clenches his jaw. That doesn't feel right. Robert studies his son for a moment, then nods. It rarely does. They walk toward the car. Behind them, inside the courthouse, Judge Harmon remains seated long after the room empties. The clerk clears her throat. Your Honor. Harmon doesn't look up. She hesitates. Administration wants a written summary of what happened today. The judge laughs quietly, hollow. Of course they do. He rubs his temples. For the first time in years, his courtroom feels unfamiliar. That afternoon, an email circulates through judicial offices. Subject line, preliminary review, initiated names are listed. Dates, transcripts requested. Judge Harmon's name appears more than once. He stares at the screen, pulse pounding. Meanwhile, across town, Devon sits at the kitchen table, textbooks spread open, trying to focus, failing. His phone buzzes. Unknown number. He hesitates, then answers. Devon Taylor? A woman's voice asks. Yes. This is Laura Chen. I work with the Judicial Review Board. Devon's stomach tightens. We'd like to speak with you, she says. About what you've seen in that courtroom. Devon looks at his father, who nods once. Yes, Devon says, I'll help. The woman exhales, softly. Thank you. That may matter more than you realize. Devon hangs up, heart racing. He isn't just a defendant anymore. He's a witness. What will Devon reveal, and how many lives could his testimony change? The interview room is smaller than Devon expected. No flags, no cameras. Just a plain table, 2 chairs, and a recorder placed carefully in the center, like it carries weight of its own. Laura Chen sits across from him, legal pad open, pen resting but unmoving. Before we begin, she says gently, I want you to understand something. You're not in trouble. You're not on trial. Devon nods, though his shoulders are tense. I know, he says. I just don't want to make things worse. Laura meets his eyes. Truth doesn't make things worse. It clarifies them. She presses the recorder. Presses. Tell me, she begins, what you noticed in Judge Harmon's courtroom. Devon thinks back. The raised voice, the assumptions. The way the judge never once asked why, only who. He talked more about me than my case, Devon says slowly, like he already decided who I was. Laura nods, writing. And how did that make you feel? Devon hesitates. Small, he admits. Like nothing I said mattered. Laura pauses her pen. Has that happened before? Devon swallows. Yes. He tells her about school hearings, traffic stops, being watched longer than others, spoken to differently. Laura listens without interrupting. You know, she says finally, we've heard similar things from other defendants. Devon looks up. Other kids? And adults, she replies. Across town, Judge Harmon sits in his office, jacket off, tie loosened. His phone buzzes repeatedly. Missed call, missed call, missed call. He ignores them. A knock sounds. Come in, he snaps. A court administrator steps inside, folder in hand. Your Honor, she says carefully, the review board has requested transcripts from your last 30 sentencing hearings. Harmon stiffens. 30? Yes, sir. She hesitates. And they've requested you refrain from presiding over juvenile cases until further notice. The room feels suddenly smaller. Is this a suspension? Harmon demands. No, she says. Not yet. She leaves. Harmon sinks into his chair. Across the city, Devon finishes the interview hours later. Laura clicks off the recorder. You did well, she says. You were honest. Devon exhales. Will it matter? She meets his gaze. It already does. Outside, reporters begin connecting dots. A judge, a teenager, the attorney general. The story starts moving, and it won't slow down now. But when the spotlight turns on the past, what else will it reveal about Judge Harmon's courtroom? The first headline appears before sunrise, not a full story, just a question. Federal review opened into local judges' sentencing practices. By noon, it's everywhere. Devon watches the news quietly from the living room, backpack still by the door. His mother hovers near the kitchen, pretending not to listen. His father stands near the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low, measured voice. Yes. I understand. No, we won't interfere. He hangs up and turns to Devon. They're pulling records now, Robert says. Years of them. Devon nods, stomach tight. Inside the courthouse, the mood has shifted. Doors that once stayed closed are suddenly opening. Clerks speak in hushed tones. Bailiffs avoid eye contact. A sense of unease lingers in the air, like a building realizing it's being inspected from the inside out. Laura Chen stands in a records room, stacked floor to ceiling with boxes. Start with juvenile cases, she instructs. Cross-reference sentencing length with offense level. An analyst beside her scrolls through a screen, brow furrowing. That's odd, he murmurs. Laura leans in. What is? For similar offences, he says slowly. There's a consistent deviation. Same charge, same priors, different outcomes. How different? She asks. In months, he replies. Sometimes years. Across the hall, Judge Harmon arrives late. For the first time in years, no one greets him. He walks to his chambers, senses something wrong before anyone speaks. On his desk lies a sealed envelope. Judicial Review Board, notice of expanded inquiry. His hand trembles as he opens it. Expanded. That word wasn't there before. Meanwhile, Devon sits in class, but the teacher's voice feels distant. His phone vibrates repeatedly in his pocket. Texts from friends, cousins, people he barely knows. I saw you on the news. Is that really your dad? You okay? He doesn't answer. At lunch, Laura calls. They've found discrepancies, she says. A lot of them. Devon's heart pounds. Like what? She pauses. Patterns that align with exactly what your father warned about. Later that afternoon, a second headline drops. Disparities found in sentencing data. Juvenile cases under review. Judge Harmon watches it from his office, jaw clenched. They're twisting numbers, he mutters. Statistics can say anything. But deep down he knows the truth. Numbers don't lie. People do. And the numbers are starting to speak louder than he ever expected. When the data exposes years of bias, will the judge finally be forced to answer for it? Judge Harmon sits very still. The television across his office plays on mute, captions scrolling relentlessly beneath a familiar image, his own. Sentencing discrepancies. Juvenile cases. Federal oversight. He turns it off. Silence fills the room, thick and unfamiliar. For years, silence had protected him. Silence from defendants who didn't know how to push back. Silence from families too afraid to complain. Silence from a system that preferred efficiency over scrutiny. But silence isn't protecting him anymore. Across town, Devon sits at the kitchen table again, the same spot where homework used to feel like the hardest thing in his life. Now, a legal folder rests beside his textbooks. Laura Chen flips through notes. We'll need a formal statement, she says, not just about what happened to you, but what you observed. Devon nods slowly. You mean, what I saw other people go through? Yes, she replies gently. You were paying attention when others weren't. Devon thinks of the young man who stood before him earlier that morning, before his own hearing, hands shaking, voice cracking, cut off mid-sentence. He didn't let him finish, Devon says quietly. The judge already decided. Laura's pen pauses. That matters. Meanwhile, Judge Harmon's phone buzzes again. This time he answers. Yes, he snaps. A familiar voice responds, calm, polished, nervous beneath the surface. This is Senator Whitfield. We need to talk. Harmon straightens. They're turning this into a circus. I warned you, the senator replies. Optics matter. You told me I was protected, Harmon hisses. You were, Whitfield says, until your courtroom became a headline. The line goes dead. Harmon stares at the phone. Protection, he realizes, was conditional. That evening, Devon submits his statement. It isn't emotional. It isn't angry. It's factual. He describes what was said, how it was said, what was never asked. When Laura reads it, she exhales slowly. This is powerful, she says, because it's restrained. Devon frowns. Is that good? She nods. It's undeniable. The next morning, the third headline breaks. Witness statements corroborate bias allegations. Judge Harmon reads it alone in his chambers. No gavel, no bench, no audience, just consequences. And for the first time in his career, he realizes something terrifying. The story no longer belongs to him. As the pressure builds and allies disappear, what will Judge Harmon do when he's finally forced to answer? The summons arrives just after dawn, a plain envelope, no seal, no ceremony. No, Judge Harmon stares at it from his kitchen table, coffee untouched, tie still loose around his neck. He doesn't need to open it to know what it says. He does anyway. Mandatory appearance, Judicial Review Board, date, time, no option to decline. For the first time in decades, Judge Harmon won't be the one asking questions. Across town, Devon dresses quietly. No suit, no cameras, just a pressed shirt and steady hands. You don't have to go, his mother says softly. Devon shakes his head. I do. The hearing room is nothing like a courtroom. No elevated bench, no gavel, no sense of hierarchy. Just a long table, 5 board members, and a recorder already running. Judge Harmon sits on one side. Devon sits on the other. For the first time, they are on equal ground. The chairwoman begins calmly. Judge Harmon, we are here to review concerns regarding sentencing disparities and conduct unbecoming of the bench. Harmon folds his hands. I've served this community honorably for years. The chairwoman nods. That's not in dispute. The data is. Charts appear on a screen behind her. Red bars, blue bars. Same charges, different outcomes. Judge Harmon shifts in his chair. These are statistics, he says. They lack context. A board member leans forward. Then provide it. Harmon opens his mouth. Nothing comes out. Devon is asked to speak next. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't accuse. He simply recounts. The words, the tone, the assumptions. When he finishes, the room is quiet. Judge Harmon stares at the table. Finally, the chairwoman speaks again. Judge Harmon, she says, do you deny saying those words? Harmon swallows. No. Do you deny similar language in other cases? Silence. I may have misspoken. A board member nods. Repeatedly. The hearing adjourns without a verdict, but the damage is done. Outside, reporters wait. Devon walks past them without stopping. Judge Harmon doesn't. Cameras flash, questions fly. And for the first time, the judge who once decided futures has no control over his own. With the truth finally on record, will accountability follow? Or will the system protect one of its own? The announcement comes 2 days later, not during prime time, not shouted from a podium. Just a quiet press release posted mid-afternoon. Judge William Harmon placed on administrative leave pending final review. Devon reads it twice to be sure. Is that it? He asks. For now, Robert replies. Systems move slowly, but they do move. Inside the courthouse, Judge Harmon's chambers are sealed. His nameplate is removed. Staff, who once rushed to accommodate him, now avoid the hallway entirely. He packs his office alone. The gavel rests in a box, heavier than he remembers. Meanwhile, more names surface, more transcripts reviewed. Patterns expand beyond one courtroom. Laura Chen stands before a whiteboard filled with case numbers and timelines. This isn't isolated, she says to her team. It never is. Devon listens quietly from the corner. What happens to the people he sentenced? He asks. Laura looks at him carefully. Some cases will be reviewed, she says. Some sentences reduced. Devon nods, relief mixed with sadness. Across town, Judge Harmon sits in his living room, television off, phone silent. He replays the moment in his mind, the words he chose, the ease with which they came. He never thought they would be remembered. Now they're all anyone talks about. That evening, another headline breaks. State announces review of juvenile sentencing practices. The ripple spreads. One courtroom becomes 10. 10 become dozens. And all of it traces back to one moment. One sentence spoken without thought. Devon stands by the window watching the city lights flicker on. I didn't mean to start this, he says quietly. Robert places a hand on his shoulder. You didn't start it, he says. You revealed it. Devon exhales. For the first time since that day, the weight begins to lift. But when power is exposed, does justice truly follow? Or does it find a way to slip through the cracks? Weeks later, the courthouse looks the same from the outside. Same stone steps, same heavy doors, same seal above the entrance. But inside, something has changed. Cases once rushed are now reviewed carefully. Judges choose words with intention. Clerks double-check records. The air feels different, quieter, more deliberate. Devon walks through the hallway one last time, not as a defendant, but as a reminder. A reminder of what happens when assumptions are challenged. A reminder that power only stays unchecked when no one dares to look it in the eye. Judge Harmon's case doesn't end with a dramatic arrest or handcuffs. Real accountability rarely does. Instead, it unfolds in reports, hearings, and consequences that echo long after the headlines fade. Sentences are reviewed, policies are revised, training is mandated, and somewhere, a teenager who would have once been labeled another statistic is now studying for his future, one that was nearly erased by a single sentence spoken from a bench. Devon sits at his desk that night, textbooks open, the courtroom finally behind him. His phone buzzes, a message from someone he doesn't know. Because of what you did, my brother's case is being reviewed. Thank you. Devon stares at the screen for a long moment. Then he sets the phone down. He didn't stand up to change the system. He stood up because he refused to be erased by it. And that, quietly, steadily, changed everything. If this story moved you, if you've ever seen power misused or silence rewarded, then like this video so more people see what accountability really looks like. Subscribe for stories where truth speaks louder than titles, and share this with someone who still believes one voice can't make a difference. Because today proved something important. Justice doesn't always arrive loudly, but it always arrives when someone refuses to bow. And don't leave just yet. In the next story, a courtroom falls silent again. But this time, it's a woman in handcuffs who turns the tables. She walked in as the accused and walked out exposing everything. Click the video on your screen now. You don't want to miss what happens next.